has invaded the workplace, whether you want it to be there or not. Your job as a manager is to make sure that your team members are using it wisely, regardless of what policies or how sophisticated your organization has become. So to help us navigate the complex world of AI in the workplace, today's guest is going to provide practical approaches to leverage AI while minimizing risk. Today's guest is Theresa Fesinstine. Theresa is a 25-year HR executive turned AI educator. She has been certified for AI and business strategy through MIT and has been focused on flattening the AI learning curve for HR and other non-technical functions for almost 3 years. In addition to her company, peoplepower.ai, she is an adjunct professor of both AI and business and HR management for City College of New York, a CUNY institution, and volunteers as a mentor through All Tech is Human. Thank you so much for joining me today, Theresa. I'm really psyched to talk about AI. I was just in a meeting with a company that was working on their AI policies and kind of debating about, should we just let people kind of use whatever tools? Do we need to be really prescriptive? I feel like we're kind of like in a sea of possibility, and a lot of us are feeling very lost about what we should do with our teams, what we are allowed to do. We sometimes get guidance from our company, sometimes we don't. It's just like, there's just so much going on. So I'm really glad to have you here and to help us kind of sort through this and figure out what managers can do to leverage AI in the workplace.
I love that. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. Having an opportunity to talk to modern managers is really exciting for me. I've always been a big advocate of supporting, educating, skill building for managers across the board at whatever level they are. And so it's so cool to have the opportunity to be a part of the podcast and to talk to managers about one of my passion projects now, which is helping people leverage AI.
Where should we start? Because I feel like we could start a lot of places. Is there a place that you think we should kick this conversation off at?
One of the things that has to be talked about is the fact that AI is being used. I kind of use the term BYOAI. It's happening a lot. So it relates to this idea of managers and organizations struggling to figure out the what and the how to put what I'd like to call guidelines in place for AI. So I think that's a good place to start around, like, how do we begin having the conversations with our employees, and how do we begin helping people feel comfortable in a way that also helps the company feel comfortable about what tools people are using, how they're using them, and sort of that whole piece of the mix.
A lot of managers, or I'll speak for myself, we're using AI, and we may or may not be getting guidance from our parent, our bigger company about what we can or can't, right? We're basically not. We're basically just like, we're just using AI. And maybe we should get even more particular here. Like, when we're talking about using AI, I'm thinking about things like, obviously, ChatGPT, right? That's clearly an AI tool that you would be choosing to use to write an email or help you expand on a memo or things like that. But then there's also things like, I use ClickUp with my team, and there's some AI features built into that where I go like, tell me what my to-do list is for today. And it pulls all of my tasks across the different projects we're working on, and it makes up my to-do list. So those are very different kinds of AI that teams could be using. And there's probably many others. So maybe we could give us a little bit of a lay of the land of like, what are the things that we might be using or managers might be using that we may not even realize we're potentially creating problems by using these AI tools for our companies if they don't really know what we're using?
I think it's not necessarily about creating problems. My whole ethos around AI is really grounded in education, so people understand the value of leveraging it, not from a fear perspective, but from a potential and creativity and curiosity perspective. There is this analogy that I use a lot in the conversations that I have with HR teams and different management leaders, is around kind of a library. Artificial intelligence to me is sort of this context. When I was growing up, I would go to the library to learn new things. There was so much information in so many formats, and AI is kind of the same thing. There are various elements of AI that are being promoted and broadcast around different tools and softwares and platforms. A lot of times, what's being touted as sort of this broad category of AI might be automation, which is not really what we're thinking about today in the context of what is generative AI. And so when we talk about generative AI, which really was launched in November of 2022 by OpenAI's, the first launch out of the gate, if you will, which was ChatGPT, and now has since been so many others have come out. I think that's a very different thing that we should talk about, which is what is generative AI? What does it do? The kind of the definition, if you will, of it for me is that it's generally creating something new, which is why you never can get a predictable, repetitive outcome from a generative AI tool, your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, your Perplexities, things like that. Going back to the first question, like, where do we begin? I think we have to begin by having conversations with our team members around what they're exploring, what they're experiencing, what their outcomes are from the context of curiosity, not from the context of we're building a policy around this. So I talked to different groups about this idea of having a policy around AI. And in my opinion, it's changing so fast and coming so quick that when policies are written, and this comes from me being a 25 plus year person in HR. So I've dealt and written a lot of policies in my career. When it comes to AI, though, I think we have to think about agility and transformation and how quickly it's working and how quickly we as organizations or managers might change our opinion about this capability due to innovation and change that comes because it's coming so fast. So I think in terms of guidelines, and those guidelines should be really clear. Most of the companies that I talk with community groups and national organizations, and I stand on these stages and I ask hundreds of people, how many of you have a guideline or policy around AI? And I'd say still today, I'm probably seeing about maybe 30%. I did a workshop last week and nobody raised their hand. So there's still a lot of work to be done on sort of how do we put something on paper that we can feel comfortable with, that we can ensure that we're not putting our company or our employees aren't putting themselves at risk, but still leverage the capabilities of these amazing tools beyond just I'm editing a document or I'm, crafting a brief or a memo.
It's so interesting, this balance between risk and leverage. The question is not actually which tools are okay and which tools are not okay, although there might be some of that does need to get figured out because I'm guessing, some tools are probably more secure than others. But it's really about what you're saying, I think, is understanding or having employees and having your team members and yourself understand what happens with the information that you're putting into the system. And then what happens with the information you're getting out of the system. It seems like that's actually where the conversation and the education needs to happen so that people can be making good choices about which tools will meet their needs in that moment, which those tools might evolve.
And I don't know if I would slightly modify the terminology to say what information you're choosing to put into that system and what's coming out of that system. I mean, within generative AI tools, the majority of them, without getting too technical with the listeners, is there's a lot that we don't know is happening in kind of the black box, if you will, of an OpenAI, ChatGPT, or Claude, or Perplexity. There's a lot of sort of unknown activity with complex algorithms and a lot of data pieces. So the message, if I had one to send to anyone or to any organization out there around like what would be the first thing I would put in my guidelines about AI, number one would be that you need to be thoughtful about what information you're entering in. You really, in general, there's so much data available and in the learning models for OpenAI, ChatGPT, all these different models, Claude, that the likelihood, and I hope I don't hear from the masses on this, but the likelihood of something outputting in the same way that it input is nearly impossible because of the way these generative AI tools, these algorithms work. And so what's important, though, is that you want to protect your own information. You want to protect your company's intellectual property. You want to make sure we're not putting any PII in there. You don't want to put any confidential, non-public information. But beyond that, there's a lot of opportunity to present information and just create expediency in getting your outputs and getting things moving along in your processes by leveraging these tools. So I do think it's about that communication and providing the top line guidelines, but recognizing that at the end of the day, There are a lot of people in your organization, whether you have a policy, a guideline, a roadmap, whatever it might be, whether you have that or not, they're already using it. And so wouldn't it be a better idea to get ahead, have those conversations, and start putting some real criteria together so that they can start learning through skills training or, infusion training to get those things learned at a more formal way?
Yeah, I was having this conversation with someone the other day because I was sharing how I use AI tools and generative AI tools all the time, every day. I take my transcripts from my interviews, I put them into ChatGPT. I say, please rewrite this as a blog article, identify 10 takeaways. Give me a summary, give me all this stuff. So I have it spitting all this back at me that I can then use as a starting point for crafting all of the content materials and things I'm going to use later on for the show. And the person was like, are you just not worried that now all of your content is in ChatGPT's system and everyone's going to have access to that? And I was like, no, because everything I do is online and available for free basically anyways. So it's already in the public domain. So I have no worries that I'm giving it my transcript because anyone could go onto my show notes and download my transcript. So it's not a big deal. But I totally see that if you're doing confidential work for a client, or if you have IP or even your own personal information, if you're putting that into the system, that could be a big problem.
You just have to recognize that there's a risk in that. It's the same risk in putting your information if you're filling out forms online. The difference is that these tools are taking this to help it become better in the future.
There's one thing obviously about putting content in, right? And having it then be part of something in the kind of in the system, in the black box system that can now get spit out for other people. But then there's things like meeting tools where it's recording and summarizing, giving your takeaways, things like Fathom and Otter and Zoom Companion. And should we be worried or just aware of those, what those tools are doing with AI also and our conversations? Or is that a safer space where you can just be yep, you can use any of those. There's kind of no harm. It doesn't matter which one. Really should really be encouraging all of our teams to be recording their meetings and using these tools to help with efficiency.
That's a maybe and answer to that one. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of the transcription tool that I use, Read AI. Part of the reason I love it is not just for the transcription, but a lot of these tools provide a lot more in the way of natural language processing, understanding sentiment, giving me insights on talk time, but also using, words that might get flagged. I use a lot of curse words, so it always likes to point that out to me. And I think the reality is for me that if we acknowledge that those tools are being used with the group that's attending a meeting, then it's understood by everybody that what's happening. I think where it gets into a little bit of a challenge is there are tools that are coming out that can sort of sit in the background and don't make people aware that they're being recorded. And that's when I think it gets a little bit certainly gets in the category of not really the best practices. And there are certain types of organizations, certain type of businesses where using a automated recorder might not be, whether it's due to HIPAA violations or confidentiality violations. There is truth that a lot of these tools do feed the data into a learning model that eventually continues to grow and intended to make the product better. But that's a part of the process of gathering data. And again, I say this a lot, this is not new. Anytime we're entering questions into Google, anytime we're searching for things online, we're entering information, queries, questions, things like that. The difference is this capability of watching and listening, we just need to be more aware of. On the manager side, I will say this. I've not seen something that I think can support management growth and educational training for downline managers or downline employees or, direct reports that I think would be as valuable as a transcriber tool. And I say this because having the opportunity as a manager myself for many, many, many years and teaching management skills, having the opportunity to use some of those transcripts as a mode of coaching or as a mode of giving feedback in a way that is not based on perspective or perception or memory, but actually based on the words that are used in the conversation, and to be able to pull those transcripts and talk with your direct reports and train them. I think about it from as a manager of recruiters. If I've got a young recruiter that's just starting out in their career, to be able to not necessarily listen in with them, which makes them a lot more nervous, maybe creates a interruption to the flow of their thinking in that conversation, but can listen to it after the fact and provide guidance and feedback. Like, what a magical, awesome tool as a manager to be able to use a transcription tool in that way that I didn't have, in my early days as a manager training people. I had to have to sit in or, rely on memories to talk about what happened in the past. This changes things a lot for managers. And I think looking at that functional use beyond just like, oh, I'm looking at a transcript, or, I think it's funny. People think that these tools are used primarily for their base function, but what they're really used for is those coaching moments, the reflection, similar to the way an iPhone, like I never use my iPhone as a phone anymore. It's just a really expensive entertainment and calendaring tool. I think these transcription tools in AI programs really serve that same purpose. And managers should be thinking about, how could I actually leverage AI for what I'm trying to accomplish with my team members? I think that's a really interesting conversation, how managers are thinking about AI, not just as a self-supporting tool for editing documents or helping me write my performance review, perhaps, but thinking about it in terms of like, instead of, creating individual files based on your employees' DISC profile or PI profile or strength finders, and how can I best work with this employee, and leveraging the valuable data that an AI tool has, whether it's built into a HRIS system or employee engagement system, or it's a generative AI tool brought about by a more public company. I think that's where managers are going to find a lot of potential growth for themselves as managers. I'm a big fan of the fact that, or not a fan, but I'm a big proponent of the fact that there's not enough training that's provided to managers and leaders within organizations. AI can serve that purpose in a lot of ways.
You can leverage AI to help you be a better manager,
Yep.
in addition to helping you get your work done. And I heard you call out a couple things. So one, which is using recordings and transcripts as a way to coach someone and have actual objective facts and data to be able to pull from, rather than this is what I, remembered you seeing or remembered hearing you say. And then, that gets to all kinds of other problems. But it actually can be something that you can even like watch a recording together and be like, do you see how you did this? Like maybe next time try it this way, or whatever it be. So that's awesome. And then the second piece of this, which is to put into your system. If you have one inside your company, amazing. And if you don't, then even going to ChatGPT and being like, I am an ESTJ and my team member is a INFP and I need to give them this feedback. And I'm using Myers-Briggs because that's my favorite. Then, right. And then it's like, how would you recommend I frame this conversation, right? What might I need to be aware of that could be challenging for this particular person, whatever it might be, and have it actually help you craft some language or an approach that takes the other person into consideration and their preferences, as well as what my natural inclinations might be, which may or may not serve us in that conversation. I love this. And I cannot wait to try this out because I've never done it before. And I really hope everyone listening will also go try it out, whatever system, whatever personality system you like, if you haven't done one of those with your teams, please reach out to me because you totally should have done one already. And but it's never too late. So you should definitely do one now if you haven't. Yes. But that's such a great way to think about AI to help managers get better at our job of managing people and not just get better at the work.
Yes.
The content of the work.
And think about this. If you took your employees, like this is where I really see the future of AI supporting managers in their work and their building of their teams. So we understand as a society that the rates of engagement with employees is going lower and lower and lower, right? And part of that is this sense of, as a humanity, we want more and more and more to feel like we are seen. I use the term, and this sounds a little flippant, but everybody is a unique and special flower, right? We all want to be recognized for our differences. And the larger an organization gets, the more difficult it is to get to create bespoke experiences for the individual. But AI can really help us with that. So one way I would do it is if you don't have like your company isn't paying for a pro plan, you can still do this by starting a new chat, whether it's ChatGPT. If you haven't tried Claude AI, that is built as a more humanistic, less biased tool. So that's something that you should definitely try out as a manager. But you can create chats just by the individuals, use initials or use the first name. Again, I wouldn't use first last, but you can use the employee's first name and upload a redacted, so take their name away, but a redacted resume, your mission, vision, values, their, DISC profile, Myers-Briggs, PI, whatever it is, your organization's culture book. And you can really start over time having conversations with this chat around good things they've done, how to communicate certain things. And if your company isn't paying for a major system for performance reviews, at the end of the year, that becomes a really interesting repository for bespoke conversation about a unique individual, and allow you as a manager to create these conversations, documents, coaching guidelines, learning guidelines, things that they need to know about the business in a really unique and special way without a heavy lift on your part. And I think that's the thing. You've got managers that want to do this hard, like this really personalized experience, but the size of their team is too large or their day-to-day is just too heavy. AI can alleviate, I think, some of the time pressure of getting that stuff done. Again, just be conscious of what you're putting in, kind of be thoughtful. There are ways around, specifying unique and identifiers for people that you can figure out pretty easily.
Do you think if we're going to do something like that, putting in things like age or gender or race is like helpful or harmful in terms of getting better guidance out of the system?
To me, as long as you're not specifically identifying an individual, I think that's a great case question. I don't know if I can imagine that better understanding how to speak to an individual based on gender, based on race, those might be really helpful things to know. Like, I think of myself as a manager. Like, there are things that open my eyes to the way I communicate to people every single day. I just saw a post this morning about daylight savings time and how that type of situation can really affect neurodiverse people. I had no idea about that. That was like such an eye opener. Wouldn't it be wonderful if I knew that somebody on my team was challenged with something like that? Again, not putting their full identifier in there, but being able to recognize that the initials LM stand for whoever it might be, and to be able to get insights like that. So instead of feeling like that person was behaving in a certain way because they were, disengaged from their work, it really had something chemically to do with them. Like, that type of insight is something that AI can provide. And I think that's sort of game changing. And again, going back to having an individual feel like you really understand their challenges, you know them, you want to support them in their work, you want to give them the best possible experience on the job so that they want to stay and work with you for a long time. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for as managers, right? We all know the stress, challenge, frustration of losing somebody and having to go through the recruitment process. So the longer you can keep that person on board, the better. Figuring out how AI can sort of, in a really nuanced way, help you do that, I think, is fascinating.
Totally agree. Okay, but we have to wrap up now. So, Theresa, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
I actually have two, but I'm going to go through them very quick. Okay. So, my second job in life, a formal job, was working at Sears Roebuck and Company. And I worked in the shoe department and had a really odd situation selling somebody's shoes at one point. And the manager of the hardware department, who I would, chat with every once in a while, asked me if I wanted to come and transfer to the hardware department. His name was Robert Schumacher. And the thing about Robert was, from a management perspective, that was the first time I really saw anybody work in their job that they had so much passion for. And throughout the years, as I've reflected on that, it's really easy to think that people working working a manager retail job. Why would they have real passion for what they do? But I think his demonstration of getting excited and energetic about what he was doing every day changed the way that I view the importance of the work that I do, not only as an employee, but as a manager, and the impression I give to everybody that works on my team that what I'm doing is exciting and worthwhile. My longest term manager was an amazing woman named Stephanie McKee. I worked with her at News Corp, and I think the reason she made such an impression on me is she really let me spread my wings and try different things and explore. She had such a great sense of humor about herself, but also would call me out if I was unhappy with something. I have a struggle with some passive aggressive, keeping angst inside me. And she really pulled that out, and it changed the way I worked with other managers in the future, and just recognizing that telling my truth or sharing my frustrations weren't going to be an opportunity to get fired, but an opportunity to expand conversation. And that was something that I think a lot of people haven't had in their experience.
Wow. Both people sound fabulous. And where can people learn more about you and keep up with your work?
So I am pretty visible on LinkedIn. So if you want to look up Theresa Fesinstine on LinkedIn, or you can find me on my company website, which is peoplepower.ai. I do keynote presentations, workshops. I really focus on flattening the learning curve on AI in a practical way. And I have my new book coming out, which is coming out on April 16th, called People Powered by AI. And it really is a playbook for HR leaders and managers that are looking to integrate AI into their world of work.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on and chatting with me today. I'm super excited to try out using some AI tools in these new and different ways to make me a better manager.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear more about it. And thank you again so much, Mamie, for having me today.